Captain Anand Dikshit, President, Indian Maritime Foundation, Admiral Vinod Pasricha, Commodore Rajanveer, former CNCs, former Vice Chief, former COMs, former COL, captains of the industry, CMDs of shipyards, DG Warship Design Bureau, DG VESI, ACOM IT and S, ACOM Mod, officers of WNC, IHQ, and ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed an honor for me to be here amongst all of you and deliver this keynote address. I compliment the organizers for having conceptualized and organized this event, which aims to brainstorm ideas for fostering innovation and indigenization in the maritime domain. I also thank Captain Anand Dikshit for introducing me to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I must confess that standing here, I find it as an onerous task to deliver the keynote address because I have amongst the audience my former mentors who have groomed me in the Navy, my former colleagues who have supported me in all my previous jobs. But notwithstanding, I shall make my best endeavor. To begin with, as you all know that more than 70% of the human body, including the brain and heart, is made up of water. Likewise, more than 70% of our planet is covered with water. The seas have always been central to human development as a source of resources and as a means of transportation, information exchange, and strategic dominion. In 2020, an article from the Center for International Maritime Security suggested a 66, 70, 80, 90, 99 rule, highlighting that 66% of the global wealth comes from or near the sea. 70% of the globe is oceanic. 80% of its population is coastal. 90% of goods arrive by sea, and 99% of international digital traffic goes by submarine cables. Ladies and gentlemen, it is important for all of us to realize that from times immemorial, the maritime nature of our nation is integral to our national identity and is firmly entrenched in our national ethos. This was aptly highlighted by Admiral Pasricha in his talk. Our history, our geography, our economy, our position, our interactions in a globalized world, and our nation's development and security are all intimately and intricately linked to the maritime domain, which is essentially the Indian Oceans and the seas around us, that surround us from the three sides. The Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, very aptly summarized the maritime character of India during the inauguration of Maritime India Summit 2021, when he said, and I quote, "Oceans are our natural borders. They have nurtured us, and India's history has been influenced by the seas," unquote. History has repeatedly reinforced the fact that supremacy at sea is paramount for any maritime power. India too had periods of notable maritime strength. While the Chola dynasty wielded significant influence in areas bordering the Bay of Bengal and Southeast Asia, it was the Zamorans, Shivaji, and Maratha Navy that maintained a credible maritime posture on the western seaboard of India. Unfortunately, the ensuing period witnessed our maritime heritage suffering a series of setbacks owing to the advent and rise of a purely land-centric outlook that allowed the British, French, and the Portuguese who arrived by sea to make inroads and rule us as colonizers. This sea blindness heralded an era of darkness for the nation. In this regard, we must remain cognizant that freedom we celebrate today was lost partly due to the absence of a credible Indian maritime power. This lesson of history was aptly articulated by Sardar K.M. Panikkar when he famously said, and I quote, "India never lost her independence till she lost the command of the sea in the first decade of the 16th century." unquote. At the stroke of midnight on 15th August 1947, as an independent nation, we once again started our journey to take the seas back. The first step in that direction was to build a strong and a capable navy. From the modest beginning of 33 ships, comprising of predominantly foreign origin platforms with limited capability and capacity, we embarked on our path of indigenization. In the 60s, we realized the necessity of in-house ship designing, which ultimately led us to set up our design organization in 1964. In the 70s, when we felt the need to look at developing, integrating, and maintaining our multitude of sensors, communication systems, networks, etc., we then set up VESI. Further, to bridge the gap between the manufacturers and the domain experts so that what gets designed and rolled out matches the requirements at sea, we set up the Naval Technical Group. Whilst indigenous defense production increased, the next challenge that we faced was that of credible testing and tuning facilities, akin to the best in the world. This gave birth to very few niche test centers like Naval EMI EMC Center, underwater ranges, and more recently, the ACG. The need to service the gas turbines fitted on iron platforms with in-house expertise gave birth to INS Excella at Visakhapatnam. When it came to sonars, the Navy established a synergy with NPOL, a DRDO lab, and Messrs. Bell, while concurrently positioning subject matter experts for respective projects. A similar model was repeated towards the indigenous development of air-independent propulsion module for submarines, as well as for the steel used in our shipbuilding projects. Our association with IIT Delhi for research in underwater domain of naval electronics and in the naval constructors training is many decades old. And similar is our engagement with other IITs and many other academic institutions. So you can see that whenever the Navy felt that there was a need of the environment to set up some niche facility, we took the initiative and set it up. In sum, I could say that over the years, the Navy has used different approaches and models to achieve success in attaining Atmanirbharta in niche fields. The Indian Navy's initiatives to build more versatile and capable platforms and become self-reliant in ship production has now started giving highly encouraging results, as there are 60 ships and submarines under construction at public and private Indian shipyards, and only 2 ships are under construction at foreign shipyards. Indigenization achieved in different categories, that is to float, to move and fight, by the Navy is as flashed on the screen. However, certain critical military hardware is still being imported, and therefore Atmanirbharta has to be the driving force for long-term sustenance, and this can only be achieved by evolving a mature and technologically advanced defense industry with focus on taking leapfrogging measures rather than tail-chasing the solutions. With this as a background as to how our indigenization efforts have progressed till date, it's important to do a quick check of the drivers that will shape our future Navy. These are primarily 2. First is our maritime interest, and second is the security situation in our areas of interest. As had been brought out by Admiral Prasicha, our country's exclusive economic zone, which measures 2 million square kilometers, bears a treasure of marine wealth and resources. The number of islands and the coastline has also recently been revised after survey by our hydrographic department, and today we have 1382 islands and 11,085 kilometers of coastline. Our international trade is largely dependent on the seas, and around 68% by value and 95% by volume of our foreign trade is seaborne. Around 88% of our oil needs are imported from across the seas, and another 6% is met from our own offshore assets. All these are vital enablers that drive India's prosperity. The importance of the seas has been well underscored by our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, who aptly stated, and I quote, "The Indian Ocean has shaped much of India's history. It now holds key to our future," unquote. Thus, it should be clear that India's growth trajectory in the Amrit Kal is inextricably linked to the oceans and will be shaped by our ability to harness the seas and ensure uninterrupted flow of trade and commerce. The unique nature of IOR offers India geographical advantages, but it also brings with it a daunting task of managing various challenges. These include strategic challenges, which are governed by the rapidly changing international order, and security challenges, which span a wide spectrum, ranging from a war with potential adversaries, terrorism, and non-traditional threats like piracy, arms and drug smuggling, illegal immigration, etc. To safeguard our maritime interest and address these challenges, the Indian Navy must remain a balanced, multidimensional force with multi-spectrum capabilities, which is also future-proof. Admiral Hari Kumar, the Chief of Naval Staff, in one of his addresses aptly stated, "Our naval strength is not just in numbers, but in our strategic vision, our innovation, and our commitment to protect our maritime interest." Talking about numbers, the Navy's current force levels stand at around 130 ships and submarines, and we anticipate that we will grow to about 170 to 175 ships by 2035. While we seek numerical growth, the focus is on capabilities rather than merely on bean count. In terms of capabilities, the aim is to deliver effects across the conflict spectrum, including the daily competition and contestation. If I were to categorize the operational capabilities that we envisage, these are flashed on the screen. Our platforms would need to be a combination of both manned and unmanned assets. These platforms have to be equipped with weapons that will encompass a mix of offensive, defensive, and intermediate options, both kinetic and non-kinetic. In this regard, we are looking for active off-board decoys, directed energy weapons, synthetic aperture sonars, shipborne BMD, hypersonic munitions, space-based weapons, and anti-ship land attack and anti-air long-range missiles. Apart from these core capabilities, we are also looking at inducting complementary functionalities such as shore-based offensive capability, ocean surveillance ships, submarine rescue capabilities, anti-piracy capabilities, hydrographic survey, hospital ships, and training ships. While we undertake this planned induction, we can continue to keep an eye on the emergent technologies in diverse fields. Few of them are flashed on the screen. Ladies and gentlemen, as I had mentioned, the only way to achieve these capabilities and the ambitious goal of becoming an Atmanirbhar Navy by 2047 is to challenge the status quo, embrace technology in every facet, innovate and indigenize. I also echo the sentiments of our Honorable Raksha Mantri, Shri Rajnath Singh, who had said that the indomitable spirit of self-reliance is the cornerstone of national security. The necessity of indigenous solutions to fortify India's defense architecture and consolidate the nation's standing in the global arena is a foregone conclusion. This, however, will demand a whole-of-nation approach and the need to create a robust synergy between the trinity of academia, R&D organizations, and the defense industry and the startups. If I were to identify a three-pronged action that I believe the Navy is rightly undertaking, then these would be indigenous design and production, that is shaping the future shipbuilding, engaging with industry, academia, startups for systems and equipment level technology development, and finally, indigenizing the existing inventory and our legacy equipment. Moving to the first line of action, that is shaping the future shipbuilding. It is said that the navies are meant to be built and not bought. It is with this foundational belief that the Indian Navy embarked on its quest for self-reliance and indigenization, which has resulted in a thriving and highly matured industry, and has the capacity and capability to construct complex and advanced platforms. The commissioning of our indigenous aircraft carrier Vikrant and the maiden trap and launch of the indigenous LCA from its deck on 6 Feb 23 are apt indications of our capabilities. Our transition from a buyer's navy to a builder's navy helped not only in supporting and promoting the Indian defense industry, but also spurred economic growth and stimulated industrial skilling, as acknowledged in the Economic Survey 22-23, which was presented to the Parliament on 31st Jan 23. For instance, Vikrant alone engaged about 500 MSMEs, created employment for 12,000 people from ancillary industries, in addition to the 2,000 odd shipyard employees. These figures and data demonstrate the strategic significance of the shipbuilding industry and its potential to significantly scale up employment generation and harness the immense multiplier effect the industry has on the economy, both directly and indirectly. A successful shipbuilding sector has been pivotal in the rapid economic development of most countries with long coastal boundaries, such as India. If you observe historical trends, we see that growth in shipbuilding has been a precursor and catalyst of overall economic progress by a nation. Europe and UK during the colonial era, US in the early to mid 20th century, Japan and Korea in the second half of 20th century, and more recently China over the last 2 decades have all displayed the same trend. Today, the Indo-Pacific has emerged as the fastest growing market in shipbuilding sector, with China and Korea alone capturing nearly 75 to 80% of the shipbuilding market. However, the Indian shipbuilding industry has not kept pace with India's economic growth, and today we have a minuscule share in the world's shipbuilding industry. The 2 branches of shipbuilding industry, that is the merchant ship and warships, share technological antecedents and many common factors in production and maintenance through the life cycle. However, the impact of emerging technologies in each of these branches differs. A plausible explanation of this difference is that the dynamics of shipbuilding in the mercantile marine is market driven, whereas warship building is state controlled. If we were to look at the future, besides the much needed policy initiatives, we also need to embrace technology at a much faster rate to achieve greater indigenization in both merchant ship and warship production. The 4th industrial revolution has indeed transformed various aspects of the maritime industry, blending physical and digital technologies in new ways. This revolution has influenced both mercantile marine and warship building, leading to innovations in ship design and construction. In today's world, virtual reality and augmented reality are transforming design, maintenance, and training in shipbuilding. 3D virtual reality models are replacing erstwhile wood or cardboard mock-ups. Stakeholders walk through the ship's pre-production before it even gets off the drawing board to refine the design, evaluate piping layout, cable routing, and indicate changes as required. This obviates rework and optimizes overall cost and build timelines. Artificial intelligence in shipbuilding would enable complex design analysis using simulators, successfully optimizing ship designs, power requirements, and sea keeping characteristics. AI applications are also being used to optimize fuel consumption and implement condition-based preventive maintenance. While our shipbuilding directorates and some shipyards have adopted some of these technologies and measures, we also need to look into the use of technology and aids in the form of software for design finalization and our decision-making processes. Our current collegiate decision-making processes often take years to arrive at frozen staff requirements. The time taking from conceiving a shipbuilding project that is going on from the approach paper to OSRs to PSRs to guideline specification, build specs, and finally signing the contract is almost equal to the ship build time in many of the cases. Therefore, we need to look at measures as to how we innovate and adopt technology to shorten this process. And finally, Atmanirbharta in shipbuilding process will only be complete with the development of ancillary industries that are part of the shipbuilding ecosystem. Parallel development of this sector would ensure that the sector remains globally competitive for exports and thus sustainable. Moving on to my second line of approach, which is engaging with industry, academia, startup for system and equipment level technology development. Reflecting on the importance of holistic development, our Defense Secretary has said that true progress is not in just building ships, but in nurturing the ecosystems that support them. The Indian defense ecosystem today has a very large pool of technically qualified human resource, world-class technology institutes, our own R&D organization focused only on defense, a thriving startup environment, and a globally competitive industrial base. Towards harnessing this potential, the broad course that we wish to undertake is encapsulated by one word: sprint. On one hand, it signals the pace with which we wish to progress, and on the other, it tells the industry the method by which we wish to progress. Sprint stands for supporting pole vaulting in R&D through IDEX, NIIO, and TDEC. The aim is to seamlessly meld the elements of innovation, indigenization, and self-reliance. A closer scrutiny of each component of sprint will indicate to you our overall thought and our expectations from the industry. Starting with the word supporting. It stands for how we view our relation with the defense industry, not merely that of a transactional buyer-seller relation, but rather that of proactive partners working alongside and assisting each other. Moving on to the second component, pole vaulting. By this, I mean that we have to generate new ideas, follow aspirational trajectories in pursuing these ideas, and establish unassailable leads along these curves that we ourselves create. Coming on to the third component, R&D. The Navy considers indigenous research and development as a game changer that could revolutionize our Indian defense industry. This would translate into availability of niche products for the Navy that are made in India and may be made for the world. As regards IDEX, it encapsulates the much required hand-holding element for our growing defense industry, especially for our vibrant MSMEs who have a crucial role to play. And finally, NIO and TDAC, the Naval Indigenization and Innovation Organization and Technology Development Acceleration Cell. These are the front ends through which the Navy will interact with all stakeholders in the defense industry to convey our specific requirements and expectations from the field. In addition, we are also supported and enabled by various government initiatives such as Defense India Startup Challenge, TDF, etc. We should therefore be able to find viable answers if we apply ourselves collectively with a larger aim in sight. For example, we had launched 75 challenge statements titled Sprint during the NIO seminar Swavlamban in July 22 for inducting niche technology stroke products into the Navy. In response, more than 1100 proposals were received and around 118 firms and innovators were selected as winners. Not only did we surpass the numbers, we could also find a few global first, game changers, and force multipliers. These were displayed during the recently concluded Swavlamban 2023. And in this regard, I would also like to highlight the positive indigenization list by the government, which have imposed import embargo on imports and are suitably relevant. The new positive indigenization list of 98 military equipment, which was released last week, is in continuation of 4 such lists of 411 military items promulgated earlier. The last line of approach which we need to follow is indigenization of the existing inventory and legacy equipment. One of the major focus areas of defense indigenization is apparently to indigenize equipment and spares currently held in our inventory so as to substitute imminent imports. Legacy machines use outdated technology, making local assembly lines costly. During indigenization, we must find modern local solutions to avoid delays, prioritize functionality over form, and address component obsolescence. Towards addressing these issues, we have created an ecosystem and requisite infrastructure for promotion of indigenization by creating organizations like DOI, Directorate of Armament Procurement and Indigenization, that is DAPI, and indigenization units at Mumbai and Vizag. Moreover, the Navy has also initiated industry yatras, wherein multidisciplinary teams visit various industrial corridors to match the existing industrial capabilities with the Navy's requirements. The Navy today has linked over 5,600 items in its inventory as import substitutes that have already been indigenized. The Directorate of Indigenization of the Navy is steering projects in a time-bound manner. Marine diesel engines, gas turbine generators, indigenous development of turbine blades, indigenization of LM 2500 GTs are a few examples in this regard. Some other measures which could be considered are leveraging the existing IGA. The current intergovernmental agreement on mutual cooperation in joint manufacturing of spares, components, aggregates related to Russian origin equipment, which was signed in September 2019, is also very relevant, considering the fact that we have a large Russian inventory. The objective of the IGA is production of spares and components in India by Indian industry by the way of creation of joint ventures and partnerships with Russian OEMs under the framework of Make in India. Second method which we can consider is adopting reverse engineering concepts. Reverse engineering is a pivotal tool in indigenization process, and if it commenced early upon the introduction of equipment while the OEM support is readily available, then this would significantly reduce our import dependency. Gentlemen, the path to indigenization is not free of challenges. Let me delve into some of the challenges that confront us as we embark on the journey of indigenization in defense, maritime, and obviously in the naval sector. First is the budget constraints. Adequate funding remains a perennial challenge for indigenization efforts. Balancing defense expenditure with other national priorities requires careful planning. Next is the technological gaps. Bridging the technological gap between India and established maritime powers is crucial. Collaboration with international partners could therefore help accelerate technology transfer. To make significant progress, we need to address technology gaps in 3 key areas. First is our cutting-edge technologies, which include military standards, technology like high-power prime movers, gun turrets, electro-optics, seeker technologies, etc. Second is our critical items like sensors, components, single-board computers, etc. And lastly, come the special materials such as carbon fiber, titanium, alloys, and nickel-based alloys and aluminum extrusions. Whilst we bridge the technology gap, modernizing and expanding shipyards and ports is essential for accommodating large-scale indigenous production. In sum, we need to focus on the infrastructure in the maritime sector so that we are able to progress our indigenization at a much faster pace. As I had brought out earlier, whilst we have achieved success in indigenization aspects of shipbuilding and integration, there is some way to go in the domains of propulsion, weapons and sensors, complex equipment such as gas turbines, gearbox, weapons and radars. And all these require large initial investment, research and development. However, the corresponding orders are always minimal. Therefore, it requires a distinct indigenization approach which involves nurturing industry through targeted R&D investment, adoption of advanced manufacturing to sustain and potentially export, ensuring ecosystem profitability. Therefore, an incentive-driven policy framework is required to become a success story, something akin to our space sector. To conclude, I would say that the current political and economic environment presents an extremely favorable opportunity for all of us in the maritime domain to embrace the national vision of Atmanirbharta or self-reliance. We are all stakeholders in this endeavor, and it is imperative that we take this as an opportunity to collaborate. I am confident that this seminar and the discussions will generate constructive inputs and thought-provoking discussions, facilitating the accelerated journey towards Atmanirbharta for the Navy and the maritime sector as a whole. I also urge all stakeholders to provide insights on policies, procedures, and engage in comprehensive discussion on the projects at hand. Wishing the participants healthy and fruitful deliberations. I would like to end my address by quoting the Chief of Naval Staff at Swavalamban this year, and I quote, "Indigenization isn't just about local production, but about building on local creativity, leveraging our own talents, and crafting solutions suited to our unique challenges." Unquote. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you, Admiral Kochhar, for that very comprehensive and, may I say, also very insightful talk that you had given. You have certainly covered a very wide canvas, and I do think that it has actually really set the tone for the sessions to follow. So thank you once again from the IMF. May I request President IMF to please present a memento to Admiral Kochhar. And also to mention that we have an organization called the Society of Indian Marine Artists. So they have prepared a number of paintings to be presented to all the participants.